So Siddharth, we'll start in a couple of minutes. We'll start at 5 sharply.
Fine, sure, okay.
Yeah. So, good evening, everybody. I welcome you all to the Knowledge Tuesday session. For the today's session, the speaker for today's session is Mr. Siddharth Jain, CEO and Medical Device Regulatory Advisor at Symbiorph Clinical Trialogy. And the topic for the today's session is regulatory requirements for AI and ML-based software as medical device. So we're very happy to have you here, Siddharth. For the participants, you can post your questions in the chat box during the session. We'll take up the questions at the end of the session. Good evening, everybody. I welcome you all to the knowledge. And we also have a feedback form for the session. We'll also post it during the end of the session, requesting participants to kindly fill it us for us to improve the upcoming sessions. Happy to have you, Siddharth. Over to you.
Okay, so thank you, Archana, for organizing such a session, and thank you for the STIC team members for again allowing me to have such a sessions on the medical device software and medical device rules and regulations. So I will be just initiating it. So our today's topic, as Ma'am has mentioned, that we are going to talk about what are the regulatory requirements for the AI and ML based software and medical devices, right? So before going ahead, just a brief background that I'm having a more than 10 years of experience in medical device regulations and I'm the CEO and the Chief Medical Device Regulatory Advisors of Symbiorph Clinical Trialogy. We are appointed as advisors in the different incubation centers like Social Alpha, Kit, TBI, Manipal, Bioincubator, AICCCMB, RICH, and many others. We have successfully given various workshops at the Global Bio in 2019-2021 at FITT, also signed STIC, TITES, Social Alpha Kit, Manipal, and many more such type of knowledge sharing sessions we have performed at the time of lockdown last year, and which is continuing this year also. So some of our startup clients are Bioscan, Comofi, Beable, Eduvo, BlackFrog, JetBlocks, and more than such 50 startups currently I am mentoring, advising in terms of medical device regulations and conducting the clinical studies in India. So now, before we jump directly to the AI and ML, we will be initiating a basic understanding about the software as a medical device, because unless and until we don't have an understanding about what you mean by the software as a medical devices, having an understanding upon how you can able to apply AI and ML rules and regulations and what it will be very difficult to it. Right. So as per the International Medical Device Regulators Forum, IMDRF, right, they have defined the software as a medical devices as a software which is intended to be used for one or more medical purpose that perform the purpose without being the part of a hardware of any medical devices, right? So then you can able to say that the product which you are developing is a software as a medical device. Now, what do you mean by the medical purpose? Medical purpose will be a different type, right? So now, as per the FDA, Food and Drug Cosmetic Acts, right, of US FDA, they consider the medical purpose as those purposes that are intended to treat, diagnose, cure, mitigate, or prevent disease or any condition. So now you can say that it is on a holistic way, it covers the all type of medical purposes. So if your software is going to be used in any of these things like treatment, diagnosis, curing, mitigating or prevention of disease, then you can say that the software is a software as a medical devices. Now, what are the regulatory development happen in the recent years in terms of the software as a medical devices? Because worldwide software as a medical device is a new things. All the regulated country like USA, TGA, Australia, the MHRA, the European Unions, right? The Canadian regulations, they all are currently formulating different rules and regulations with respect to how to regulate the software as a medical devices. And further, once they got regulated the software as a medical device, ultimately they can able to regulate the artificial intelligence and the ML based software as a medical device also. So one such standard which is currently being focused is about the ISC 82304, right, which is a general requirement for the product safety of any software based which are on the healthcare based, right? So manufacturers requirement for the safety and security of the healthcare softwares, products which are designed to operate on a general computing platforms and intending to be placed on the market without any dedicated hardware, right? These are the requirements for that. Right?
Sorry to interrupt, Siddharth. We couldn't see your slides moving, and is this in the current? It's in the first slide. So I just want to check, and can please put it in the presentation mode, Siddharth. That would be fine for the audience too.
Okay, it's a presentation mode. Okay, I will again do that. Okay.
Yeah, it is currently in the first slide. So yeah.
Okay. I have. Okay, I will do it again. Are you not able to see the screen?
Yes, Siddharth. Yeah, we could able to see it. Could you please put it in the presentation mode, Siddharth?
Yeah, it's on presentation mode. Now now you can see the slides are moving.
No, it's currently in that slide number 7, but we couldn't see the slides moving, and it's not in the presentation mode too.
Over here, it's showing on presentation mode.
We can select the option, the entire screen.
Now it's.
Yeah, we could see the slides moving, but it's in the normal screen, so that you should keep it in the presentation mode, right?
Yeah, now it's moving.
No, so that we couldn't see we couldn't see it in the presentation mode, and it's not moving also.
Okay, so should I do on normal mode then? Because it will save the time. What you suggest?
Yeah, this is fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, this is fine. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So fine. So I'm here at the software as a medical devices. So I will be again initiating that as per the International Medical Device Regulatory Forum, right? IMDRF. They have defined what you call it the software as a medical devices. So any devices, any software which are used for one or more medical purpose, that is without being used as a hardware, right? Then you can say that the software which you are developing is considered as a software as a medical devices. Now, moving ahead, what you mean by the medical purpose? That FDA has defined the definition of medical purpose as those purposes which are intended to treat, diagnose, cure, mitigate, or prevent disease or any condition. So any of the softwares you are developing falling under this category of treatment diagnosis, you can say that it's a software as a medical devices. Now, there are, as I already talked, that there are the various rules and regulations being developed by the different regulators worldwide. So, one such standard being developed is ISA 82304, which talk about that what are the safety and security requirements a manufacturer should be in place when they are developing a healthcare software, right? And it should include the entire life cycle, including the design and development, validation, installation, maintenance, and disposable of health software products. So this particular standards talk about that. Then most of the startups companies and the regulators, they are following this IMDRF requirements because they have come up with a series of regulatory standards or the guidance document, I will call it, right? So one such is that IMDRF N10, which talk about what are the key definitions of the SAMD. Then the IMDRF N12, it talk about what are the possible framework for risk categorization and corresponding considerations of the software and medical devices. Then the N23, it talk about what are the quality management system requirements, right, which is applicable for the manufacturers of the SAMD. And then there is N41, which is released in 2017 and further it's amended. It's talked about the clinical evaluation requirement for the software as a medical devices. So currently, various startups in India, they are developing a software-based medical devices or AI-based software as a medical devices. So I will request them to kindly go through this N41 guidance document of MDRF. It is beautifully written, and if you are planning to go for USFD or CE marking for your product, then without complying with this N41 requirement, it will be very difficult to get you get through the 510K application for your software as a medical devices. Further moving ahead, if you are a medical device and IVD startup, then the essential principal safety and performance requirement as per the N47, we have to consider it. So there are a series of 5 guidance documents published by the IMDRF that we should have to follow if we are developing a software as a medical devices. Moving ahead, the FDA, they have just published a draft guidance document on the clinical and patient decision support software. Hello? Yes, Archana.
Nothing, Siddharth. Please proceed.
Okay, yeah, okay.
From some of the participants here, please.
Fine. Okay, right. So if you are developing any softwares, right,
Yeah,
which is
required, the voice was breaking.
Okay. So if you are developing any...
Sorry, can you please repeat?
Madhubala, I think the connection issue is from your end. We could able to hear him clearly.
Okay.
Please go ahead, Siddharth.
Okay, fine.
Okay. I just want to read.
Okay, fine. So FDA have just published a draft guidance document on the clinical and patient decision support softwares, right? What you mean by the clinical decision support software which are intended for healthcare professionals, right? And then the patient decision support softwares which are intended for patients and caregivers who are not healthcare professionals, right? So they have published this guidance document so that we have to consider it when we are doing any type of verification or validation of your softwares, because at that time they have written that what all control and what all strategy you should have it when you are developing this type of softwares. Then moving towards the European Union, what they have done it, the European Union, they have published a MedDev 2.1/6 guidance document, and in that it helps the manufacturers of the software as a medical device to do how to you can define how you can able to classify your standalone softwares, right? So basically they are divided into the 4 different aspects, right? There are the 4 subclasses as per this mandate 2.1 /6 requirements of the European Commissions. So if I talk about these 4 subclasses, the first class is that the softwares that are explicitly mentioned in one of the directives. Right, the directive means the IVDR directive and the MDR directives. Right now, the directive has been changed to the medical device regulations and the IVDR regulations. Right, software which influence or control the medical devices, such as software for the planning of radiotherapies. Right, softwares with a view to diagnose or monitor, such as software for the evaluation of long-term ECG signals or the measurement of any anatomical measurement in a radiograph. So they are coming under the subclass of the medical device softwares. Software which is used for or through the patients for the diagnosis. For example, right, that attention deficit disorders can be diagnosed. Right, so over there, with the help of the patient, right, they are the companies who are developing the softwares for the psychiatrist disorder, right, to analyze the disorders happening to the patient. So this all type of things will be coming under the software as a medical devices. So this is what it talk about if you are planning to go for the European Commission CE marking. So in that case, we have to follow the requirement of mandate 2.1/6. Now, moving towards the India requirements. So you all know that on 11 February 2020, right, the CDSCO, they have published the 2 gazette notifications. The first gazette notifications talk about the medical device definitions. And in that medical device definition, they have also included software or an accessory. Right, I have underlined the word. So anyone who are right now developing the software or an accessory, right, is coming under the definition of the medical devices as per the Indian medical device rule, which is amended in 11 February 2020. Right. So all the softwares you also need to go for getting the manufacturing license as per the Indian medical device rule. You all know that the Indian medical device rule, they have classified them into A, B, C, and D, right? Based on the risk-based classification of the medical device, on the same way they have done it for the softwares also. Now, what they have done it that on the 13th September 2020, they have released a set of document which state that what all are the non-notified medical devices, which, and they have classified them into A, B, C, and D. And if you see this classifications rule, which is published on 13 September 2020, right, they have classified the 60 software as a medical devices based on this category of A, B, C, and D. And what all these softwares are, I am just giving you a brief about this. Are some of the software. Total 60 softwares, the CDSCO has classified them into A, B, C, and D. These are not the complete list. This list will keep on adding or keep on amending. But as of now, I have just put this 6 or 5 product. So if the software which are used in the insulin pumps, or you are used in the coronary vascular simulation softwares, right, for the continuous glucose monitoring, for the data analysis of the continuous glucose monitoring. So they have defined it, right? So it's my request, go to that notification which released by the CDSCO on 13 September 2020. They have listed 60 softwares which are now classified into A, B, C, and D. Before moving ahead on the AI, some of the examples of the software as a medical device which understanding should be very necessary, right? If software as a medical devices you are developing is focused on the concerning a physiological or pathological state, right? Software that give information about a condition or disease from results generated by any in vitro diagnostics, right? Results may be qualitative or quantitative, or can be entered manually by the users or automatically, right? Some of the basic examples are the app and software that are intended to diagnose or used to calculate the clinical risk, or intended to provide any clinical decisions. Then you can say that your product is falling under the category of software as a medical devices, and that category is a physiological or pathological state. Moving ahead, then, if any software as a medical device is used for concerning congenital abnormalities, right? Software that give information about an acquired or inherited conditions or disease generated from IVD, right? Apps and software that are intended for detection and interpreting mutations in DNA, right? So if I talk about that in India and worldwide, there are the various type of softwares, genetic profiling softwares or bioinformatic based softwares has been developed by the startup, right? Who will able to determine at which gene level the mutation is happened, right? And it can able to detect what will going to be happen, right? So all this type of softwares, right? Genetic profiling softwares which are developing right now by the startups, they all are coming under the category of software as a medical devices, right? Moving ahead, any softwares and apps which are used to determine the risk of trisomies can also be considered as a software as a medical devices. Moving ahead, to determine the safety and compatibility with potential recipients. So it means that at the time of donor, right, there are the apps which are developing which do the HLA type of matching, right? So the softwares which do HLA type of matching, right? You can say that is also coming under the software as a medical device category, under the category of safety and compatibility with potential recipients, right, for matching organ donors with the recipients. So these are a typical example. There are the startups who are developing the HLA based IVD kits, and that IVD kits they are doing with the help of the software also. They are including the softwares also. So these are the typical examples of this. Moving ahead, to monitor the therapeutic measures, software that give information about the presence or amount of a pharmaceutical or other therapeutic measures, right? You can say that is coming under the software as a medical devices. Some of the typical examples are the apps and softwares that are intended to provide the information for the calculation of the drug dose, like the blood sugars, creatinine, or genomic variants. Software which are used for therapeutic drug monitoring, right? If you see about there are insulin pumps, right? They are the pumps which used to administer the drug at the required frequency or timeline, right? So, so there are the softwares are coming which measure the accuracy of the drug administered to the patient, right? So this type of software are also coming under the software as a medical devices. Further, any softwares or apps which used to monitor the blood glucose or thrombin time or coagulation timelines, right? You can say that is also coming under this category of monitoring therapeutic measures, example of software as a medical devices. So there are the various startups who are working on this category of monitoring the blood glucose or monitoring the prothrombin level time, right? At a time of blood transfusions, right? Calculation of prothrombin is very important. Coagulation level is very important. So there are the startups who are developing this type of software also. Then typical examples of the softwares which are used for the prevention of diseases, right? Typical examples include software that claim to be able to prevent specific disease. Example are the software that claim that output from physical device can prevent disease, right? So there are the companies who are developing this type of software also. Diagnosis, right? There are the hundreds of startups who are focusing into it, right? Which include devices that supply information for the detection, diagnosis, as well as those perform the diagnosis independently. Typical examples are the apps and software that provide medical condition advice based on user entered data. And you have to just enter your data, and then on that basis, the diagnosis will be happening. A typical example are that for the sugar patient, right, or to the patients who are going to the gym, right, they are very health conscious, so they are putting how much calorie they are eating and how much they are burning, right? On that basis, the data are generated, right? So all this type of apps also are coming under the software as a medical device categories. Other examples are the softwares that are intended to indicate the risk that are very specific to the patients which are developing, right? Like with respect to the heart, right? They are ECGs monitoring device, right? That they are continuously monitoring the ECGs, and then they are interpreting the data with the help of AI and ML, and that they can able to, and then they will say that what are the chances of having any particular heart disease. So that are also coming under the software as a medical devices. Another example is that softwares which are intended to use to diagnose, assess, monitor the skin by use of image taken by or imported into the app, right? So for the skin, right, there are different type of skin cancers, right, happening worldwide. Now there are the startups who are developing the app where just by clicking the app and by the remote monitoring of the skins, right? With the help of the app, we can able to diagnose that what are the skin conditions, whether they are healthy or benign, and how the skin treatment will be happening, right? So these are type of softwares are developed by the startups. Moving ahead, monitoring, right? Monitoring is very important area where the major chunk of startups worldwide they are focusing into it. Monitoring means to assess the progress or severity of any disease or an injury or the handicap, right? So any softwares following under or falling under this category are also come under the software as a medical devices. Some more typical examples include softwares which allow remote access to informations of physical monitors and applies user-defined filtering rules to any alarms generated by the original device, right? Monitoring, the typical example, if I take about the Alzheimer's disease patients, right? Right. Over there, they are the companies who are developing the software-based devices where they are do the monitoring, right, of their physical conditions, right? So all this type of coming under this category. Further, software that monitor the patients and collect information entered by the users, measured automatically by the app or collected by a point of care device, may qualify as a medical device if output is intended to affect the treatment of an individuals. Right. So over here, a typical example, if I can able to suggest you that at the time of sleep, right? There are the apps which are started are developing with respect to the sleep data analysis, right? Where the patient, the caregivers, or they are putting some data of their sleep profiling, right? And that will going to affect on the treatment of an individual. So again, this type of things are coming under the example of software as a medical devices. Then typical example of treatment and elevations, right? If a software provide information that can be used to enable treatment to be performed or claimed, right? Then you can say that is building a software as a medical devices. Elevations means device that reduce symptoms or severity of disease or injury or handicap. Examples include the softwares which calculate the dose of insulin. A diabetic need to treat their diabetes based on carbohydrate in a meal, right? So the insulin calculations, software that are intended to automate the treatment pathway for individual parts of individual patients. Now the software which are used for treatment of any neurotrauma, neurodegenerative, or neuropsychiatric conditions. So all these type of softwares are coming under the category of software and medical devices. And compensations means software that manufacturers claim can compensate for an injury or handicap, or claim the sensors and output from the physical device. Examples include the software that are intended to magnify the text, specifically for people with visual impairment, right? So there are the companies who are working on the assistive tech, right? Where patients, where they are focusing towards the blind patients or the visual impairment patients, right? Or patients who are not able to hear, right? So there are various softwares which are developing in that category on that area. All of them, they are falling under the compensation, and they all are coming under the software as a medical device category. Also, software which are intended to amplify the sound for people with a reduced hearing, right? They are the startups I know that they are developing in this type of area. So these are coming under the software as a medical devices. Now, the investigation, replacement, and modifications. The typical examples are the educational anatomy of physiological app and software. So they are the startups who are developing the software-based product, right, which give the educational training, right. They are completely mimicking the human anatomy, right, and then this they are giving the training to the doctors or to the resident doctors or to the to the new treatment conditions, right, for the treatments also, right, where the treatment is very complex, right. So they are developing a 3D type of models or the educational anatomy where the doctors they can do a pre-type of mock type of surgeries and then they can do. So there are different type of apps and software are developing this type of areas. So they all are also coming under software as a medical devices. Then control of conceptions, that they are the softwares which are developing, right, which helps to determine, right, the conceptions or enable the conceptions based on the basal body temperatures, or they are the softwares which are developing to determine the cycles, right, or application for conception and conceptions purposes, right, which are used entered by the patients itself, right. So there are the software, there are the companies who are developing in this area also, right? And this area is one of the very promising area of developing or moving to the software and medical devices. Right? So now I have given you a very brief understanding about what you mean by the software as a medical devices, what are the definitions, and how you can able to say that whether your product is falling under a category of software as a medical devices. I also brief you about that. In India, also the regulations are upcoming right now. They have already published 60 software as a medical device, right, based on classification A, B, C, and D. More such devices are upcoming by the CDSU and the Indian regulators. So we have to keep on watch, right? Now I will be going to discuss about what are the AI and ML based regulatory requirements and how you can able to fulfill with respect to the Indian requirement and US and European requirements. If I give you with respect to the India requirement, in India, currently the AI and ML based software as a medical device, there is no any such regulations been published by the Indian regulators. So we are going to adopt either the European Union AI ML based regulations or the US FDA rules and regulations. In the USA also, the AI and ML based rules and regulations, they are upcoming. It is not finalized. Many of the regulations we developed by the US FDA is either on the draft version or is under the review, right? So on the worldwide scale, if I talk about the AI and ML based software as a medical device rules and regulations are not currently stringent. They are growing right now. The regulators are developing various rules and regulations. So, however, I have taken some of the inputs from the US FDA regulations of software as a medical device along with the AI. Right now, moving at what you mean by AI and ML, right? Artificial intelligence and machine learning based technologies, they have a various potentials to transform the healthcare. Why? Because it can help in early disease detection. They are more accurately diagnose the disease, right, and identify a new observations or pattern on human physiology and development of a personalized diagnostic and therapeutic for that particular person. So that's why currently the AI and ML base is the one of the area where all the startups are focusing into. What are the benefits? The benefits of AI and ML in the medical device area is that it learns from the real world feedback. It means training and retraining, right? And it improves its performance. It means the adaptations, right? Adaptations happening from training and retraining, right? So that's why these technologies are currently expanding, rapidly expanding in the different research and development area of the medical devices. Understanding the AI and ML. AI, artificial intelligence, means the theory and development of the computer systems, right, which able to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence, such as visual perceptions, speed recognition, decision making, and language translations. So this is a typical definition of artificial intelligence published by the IMDRF. Further moving ahead, machine learning is a scientific study of algorithms and statistical models that computer system use to effectively perform a specific task without using explicit instructions, relying on models and inference instead. So there are typical two important definitions which we should know when we are developing a AI and ML based software as a medical device. So there are the many such definitions. So these two are the important definitions. Now, types of AI ML based software as a medical device modification. These three things are very important to understand. Now, suppose that you have already developed a software as a medical device, right? And you are selling in the market from a quite long period of time. Suppose you are selling in last 2 years successfully in the market. Now you would like to have AI and ML based, or in that same software which you are selling from the last 2 years. You want that software should also perform AI and ML based type of predictive data analysis or based off things. So understanding these three important definitions is very important. What type of modifications should be included, right? One such modifications which were done on the software which were developed, which is not AI ML, it's a general software as a medical devices. And that on a general software as a medical device, you are doing some modifications to make them a AI and ML, right? So you are doing that modification either on the performance, input, or intended use. These are the three type of typical modification suggested by the US FDA, right? So the performance, right? You are doing the performance change or modifications on the existing software as a medical devices. So performance in the term of clinical and analytical performance, right? Typical examples are that you are increasing the sensitivity of a software as a medical device to detect the breast lesions, right? For which are suspicious for the digital mammograph, right? You are increasing the sensitivity. It means that you are increasing the performance of your existing software as a medical device to detect the breast lesions, right? So this is a typical example of performance. Now, inputs. Inputs means used by the algorithm and the clinical associations to the software as a medical device output, right? It means that examples, from the example, you can able to understand that you have a software as a medical device, right? And then you want that your software as a medical device should also be compatible with the CT scans, right? Which are developed by the additional manufacturers, right? It should not be very specific to that particular CT scanners, right? It's not specific for a CT scan of Philips. It should be that CT scan for GE also, right? So, right. So you are changing an input of the algorithm so that the CT scan of all the different manufacturers of the CT scanner can also be accepted by your software as a medical devices, right? So that you can able to apply the AI and ML into it. So this type of modifications is also coming into. This is one type of input modifications. Second example is that expanding the input for a software as a medical device that diagnose the arterial fibrillations, right? So suppose you have developed a software as a medical device which only used to diagnose a particular type of heart condition, right? But now, after getting a feedback from the doctors or seeing the market scenario, right, in India or any particular country, you want that no, I want that in my software as a medical device, I want the oximetry data also, right? So this type of, so you have changing the input algorithm of your software as a medical devices, right? So this type of things are also coming under the AI ML based software as a medical device modification input type, right? So expanding the input and or modification of the input, right, where you can able to input the from a different data sources, they all are coming under the type of input modifications. Then the third important is the intended use, right? If you are changing the intended use of a software as medical devices, right? Typical example is the expansion of a software algorithm for lesion detection from one type of cancer to another, right? There are different type of cancer lesions, right? And you want that your software as a medical devices, right? Algorithms can also detect more 5 different type of skin lesions or cancer lesions, right? So you are expanding the intended use of your device. So in that case, it also falling under the this type of AI ML based category, right? And you have to definitely you don't have to mesh the IMDRF risk categorization framework. What is IMDRF risk categorization? They have classified them into class 1, 2, 3, and 4, depending upon the risk categorization of your software and medical devices. And accordingly, all the strategies, risk control methodologies, planning should be get initiated. So these are the 3 very important definitions for type of AI ML based software modification which you should understand. Because the next thing which I'm going to discuss is totally based on all these 3 definitions. Now, I've taken this from the US FDA guidance document that what are the total product life cycles of the regulatory approach? What approach you should use if you are falling under a AI ML based software as a medical devices, right? They are divided into 4 parts, 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? The first part is good machine learning practice. So what you mean by the good machine learning practice, right? So being a medical device manufacturer and startup, that we expect and or the regulator expect that you should have a good quality management system in place, right? So in the same way, if you are developing AI and ML based software in medical devices, that you should maintain a good machine learning practices, right? You should have proper documentations starting from data selections and management to the model of training to the tuning, retraining, right? And then the model validations. This model validation is very critical and very important because recently the US FDA and IMDRF they have published the guidance document about what we the requirement for the performance evaluation and clinical evaluations for the AI and ML based software as a medical device or for the software as a medical device startup or the manufacturers. Right. Moving ahead, point number 2, what are the pre-market assurance or safety effectiveness which you will look into it? Then what are the review of the pre-specification and algorithm change protocol that I will be going to discuss in next slide, what you mean by these 2 definitions. And then the 4th important thing is when you deploy, right? What are the real world performance monitoring data? How you will do it, right? So that further retraining, tunings, then the model validations will be getting it only from the real world performance monitoring. If you are doing the real world performance monitoring in detail, right? Then your data which you are developing, right? You can able to see that the retraining and the revalidation is happening on the quite regular frequency of timeline. I know the startup that they missed the point number 4. They are missing the point number 4 and point number 5. Point number 1, right? They are already developed. Once they had developed the real world data, right? But they are not continuously doing the monitoring activities. And because of lack of continuous monitoring, the retraining of data is not happening. And if the retraining of data is not happening, then the performance evaluation and clinical evaluation data is very limited. Right? So think on how you can able to do a real world performance monitoring, how you can interlink with the retraining of your existing data, and how you can again able to initiate the performance evaluation or clinical evaluation of the software AI and ML based software as medical device. So these things are repeated, right? It's not a one-time thing. You have to keep on repeating this cycle. Now, as I talk about the first is about the establish the clear expectation on quality systems and good ML practices, right? Either you call it a good ML based practices for it's nothing but about the quality management system. Each thing should be get documented. Now, I also discussed about the clinical evaluations. So, clinical evaluation, clinical validation for the AI and ML base is very, very critical, right? You have to write a very well planned and detailed protocols, right? There are very few consulting companies or a very few dedicated companies or few subject matter experts are available, right? Who understand how to write the AI and ML based clinical evaluation protocols, right? We have to see that whether the clinical protocols, right, which you are writing should be having a provide any accurate, reliable, or precise output data or not. So it's all about how beautifully or how detailed you write your primary endpoint, secondary endpoint, specificity requirement, sensitivity requirement, accuracy requirements, repeatability requirements, right? All these things will be written in detail in your clinical protocol. Unless and unless you don't have a well written detailed clinical protocol, these two things, the value clinical associations, the analytical validations data, it will be very difficult to get it, right? And if you don't have these things in detail, it will be very difficult for you to get any regulatory approvals in US FDA or in Europe, right? In India, currently the requirements are building, but it will be very difficult. So you have to start doing all these activities, right? The second thing is about the initial pre-market assurance of safety and effectiveness. Third thing is about the pre-specifications of software as a medical device and algorithm change protocol. I will be going to discuss what these two things are, and then the real-world performance monitoring of your AI ML based software, and then how you can able to interlink with the point number 5, then the retraining and the re-evaluation and the re-clinical validation of the software as a medical device. Now, SAMD pre-specifications, what you mean by these two are the very important definitions. It means that software as a medical pre-specifications mean that manufacturers, they are doing different type of modifications, which I discussed. They are either doing the performance modifications input or the internal use modifications, right? So it means that what are your expectations from the, after doing this type of modifications, what you want from the software, right? That means about the pre-specifications, right? They are the types of changes that manufacturers plan to achieve when the software as a medical device is in use. That these changes you want, that these are your expectations. Definitely, being a startup, being a developer, you should have some expectations, right? Their expectations are nothing but the Jain input. If I talk about the expectations, the user need, and the design input part, they all are same thing, right? The expectation, you must be having some expectation. All of them have some expectation. So these are nothing but pre-specification, SPS. The SPS draw a region of potential change if you have the expectations in detail written, right? It will draw a borderline thing that I want this type of changes happen, or algorithm, I want this type of algorithm change or inbuilt in my software, right? So this is what you know about or mean by the SPS. Moving ahead, algorithm change protocols, right? Algorithm change protocol specify that the manufacturers has in place, right? There are specific methods, SOPs, risk control strategies, which are anticipated from that modification which you are doing. All things should be in that place, right? When you are preparing an algorithm change protocol. Suppose you are having an software as a medical device, right, with you, and you have your SPS well defined and detailed. Yeah, then the step 3 is that to prepare a algorithm change protocol. Step 3 will be preparing the algorithm change protocol, where you will be defining what are the risk you have identified, what risk control strategies you are doing, right? And what other method mean strategy you should be in place, right? When you are actually initiating the algorithm change in your software, right? So SAP is a step-by-step delineation of the data and procedures to be followed so that modification achieve its goal and the device remains safe and effective after the modification. So these two are the important goal of the startup, of the software, that the software, whatever change you do 10 different changes, we don't have any issue. The regulator don't mind anything. Unless and until the output which you are generating from the software, right, they are safe and effective, right? So these two are the basic definitions which are important for the understanding. I'm taking a typical example of skin lesion mobile medical app, right? So how we can able to include the SPS and the APS and ACP into it, right? So there's a one startup or a company who are developing a skin lesion based mobile medical app, right? And an AI/ML MMA use images taken by the smartphone camera to provide detailed information to a dermatologist on the physical characteristic of a skin lesions in order for the dermatologist to label the skin lesion as a benign or malignant, right? So this is what the software as a medical device it is, right? Now, this mobile medical app will drive clinical management in a serious healthcare situation or the condition, right? So it's a higher risk software as a medical devices where AI and ML is inbuilt into it, right? Now, what modifications the startup or the manufacturer is anticipated? Two potential modifications are anticipated by the manufacturers that the first thing is that they will improve the sensitivity and specificity and analyzing the physical conditions or characteristic of benign or malignant skin lesions using real world data. Now, see, they are now modifying the softwares using the real world data to improve the sensitivity and specificity, right? So this is one SPS defined by the company, and the second SPS defined by the startup and company is to extend the MMA, the mobile medical app, to be used with similar smartphones to image acquisition system. So it means that the softwares should be not be very specific to any smartphones, right? It's not like that only Android smartphone it should be applicable. It should be also be used on the Apple app also, right? So it should be used by the different type of smartphones, right? Not very specific to only one particular brand or one particular company smartphone can be able to use your software as a medical device. It should be on wide area, right? So this is the second requirement or SPS of the startup, right? With pre-specified acceptance criteria for the image acquisition characteristics and a real-world performance plan to monitor the performance across image acquisition system. So these all things that you want. You want real-world performance plan, right? So that the data acquisition will remain uniform along all the type of caregivers, right? So this is what the SPS is. There are two SPS to include to have the improved sensitivity specificity. Second thing is that it should be used by the similar smartphone for the image acquisition system where you can able to inbuild the real world performance plan, right? So this is what your expectations is clear. Then the ACP will be for these modifications, right? The ACP includes the detailed method for database generations, reference standard labeling, comparative analysis with respect to performance requirement, which include sensitivity and specificity. So you have to prepare the entire plan, how you can able to do this type of modification on your existing SMD, what are the risks involved into it, right? And how you will be able to validate the data, right? All these things will be get discussed in detail under the ACP. So the manufacturers incorporate the acceptance criteria for image acquisition systems intended for future compatibility with the MMA and the validation study to demonstrate that MMA performance requirement using new input, right? So what is happening right now that you have a software as a medical. You have already done data acquisitions and you have already established your performance specificity, sensitivity, and performance requirement, right? Now, what is happening that you are inbuilding AI and ML into it with the help of real world data. So again, you have to reinitiate the clinical validation studies. You have to again establish your sensitivity and specificity data. And you also have to initiate the performance requirement or the performance study of your data, right? So that you can say that with the help of real world performance, that the data which you are generated is safe, effective, and performance is very high. And that all these things should be happen under the GMLP. That is nothing but about the that the good activities, the manufacturing activities, right? The manufacturing activities of your software should follow the GMLP. So this is what all about what is happening in the area of AI and ML. So any question with respect to the AI and ML modifications type or the definition of SAMD, how you can able to say that whether your product is coming under the software as a medical device category or not, uh, or how the India is focusing into it, what with respect to the India requirement. As I say that 60 devices, 60 softwares are right now coming under the software as a medical device as per the CDSU requirements. So any question with respect to that, the questions are most welcome.
Thank you, Siddharth. So participants can post your questions in the chat box, or you can unmute and go ahead with your questions. So as they start posting, some of the questions are already in chat box, so I can read out
Fine,
those
sure.
questions.
Okay. Right.
So one from
Anyway, good for me. No issue.
yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, the first question from Remco's his question is how much, in what ways can a manufacturer demonstrate transparency about AI or ML SMAMD algorithm? I mean, like algorithm updates or performance improvements or labeling changes. So in what way manufacturer can demonstrate transparency about AI or ML algorithm?
Okay, about the transparency, to maintain the transparency is most with respect to how well established your clinical data you can able to do that.
Yeah. Hope that answers Remco's technology questions. Any further questions you can unmute and go ahead.
Or I will connect to my technical team also, who expert in the AI and ML also, to answer in more in detail about the transparencies, how you can able to maintain more transparencies into it. Because we in our company we have a dedicated team for AI and ML, software as medical device rules and regulations. So they are more expert, so they can able to answer him offline also.
Yeah, thank you, Siddharth. So another question from Siddharth Nair. Siddharth Nair, would you like to unmute and go ahead with your question? Siddharth, would you like to unmute and go ahead? Okay, I'll read out the question for him. So where can we access the 60 SAMD list? Could not find in CDSCO notifications.
Okay. They are published on 30th September. What I will do is I will share with the team of STIC, so they will forward to you the entire list.
Yes, Siddharth. So some of the participants also would like to checking whether they can share the presentation.
Yeah, I will share the presentation.
Yeah, so participants who want a presentation, you can write to us. So we will share the presentation from Mr. Siddharth. So another question from Jadeja. Jadeja, do you want to unmute and go ahead with your question?
Sure. Can you hear me, Archana?
Yeah,
Yes,
I'm able to hear you. Yes.
Hey, Siddharth, just like to understand, what are some of your personal observation, from getting an AI ML software as a medical device is regulatory approved? Have you had an experience in getting any AI ML SMD approved from any of the regulators, be it India, Europe, or FDA?
So currently, my two projects of AI, ML, SAMD, USFDA work is going on right now. So we have yet not submitted. We are planning to submit a pre-submission in the month of June and July. So hopefully we can able to get some feedbacks on the dossiers which we have prepared, right, from the last 6 months which we are preparing. So we hope to get the feedback by the month of June, July. We are planning to submit the pre-submission in USFDA in the month of, and also for the European market, in Europe the regulation is not very stringent right now. So currently, for the CE marking and the European Commissions, the input which I am going to get it is only by the month of November, December.
Okay, and any observation while preparing these dossiers, like something that you had to, and Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So currently, they are focusing more with respect to the entire software as a medical device lifecycle verification and validations. These are the more in-depth things are required over there. And the second thing is about the clinical validation of your AIML, right? What is happening that as per the IMDRF guidelines that they have published for the clinical validations, there are the many different terminologies which is difficult for to understand or to prepare the protocols along with that time with the guidance document, right? So these are the challenges which we are facing when we are developing or we are initiating any type of protocol preparations or when we are defining the primary secondary endpoints.
And last follow-up question. Sorry to kind of holding this
Yeah.
discussion. The last question is that the two companies that you mentioned, are these Indian companies you're getting it approved, or it's like in foreign companies?
No, they are Indian companies only. They are Indian startup company only.
Wonderful. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. One more question from Vishwanathan Gautam. Would you like to unmute and go ahead, Vishwanathan? Okay, his question is, we are developing AI algorithm for breast cancer detection with Demograph. What are the important certification we would require for the software, and will you be able to help in this, and what are the charges for this?
Yeah, we have a full-time employee for carrying out the software verification validations, having 15 years of experience in doing this activity. Rules and regulations, the typical rules and regulations is that you have to follow first the 62304 requirement, which is a typical requirement for the software verification and validations, right, for the medical devices. Plus, we have to meet what are the software requirements of US FDA, right? Because we are following two particular requirements, one of US FDA and one from Europe, to do any type of software verification and validation. So we have to follow that particular only. In India, there is no such requirements published by the CDSO or the other regulators, but in Europe and USA, we are following the 62304 and US FDA published guidance document on software as a medical device verification and validations.
Yeah. Hope that answers Vishwanathan's question. If you need a follow-up question, you can unmute and go ahead. So another question, Siddharth, from the chat. So how much the SAMD will cost for European Union CE marking and FDA approval, and what is the duration to get the approval?
Yeah, for the SAMD, for the Europe, you can consider around 12 to 14 months of timeline to get the approval. Reason being why the timeline are high because of the limited number of notified body available in Indian market, and the cost will range because the CE marking is for 5 years. So you can say that typically anything between 25 to 35 lakh of rupees you have to spend to get a CE marking of your product for software and medical devices.
Thank you, Siddharth. So it's already 6, so we'll just take the last question in the chat box. So question is, what is the difference between the SAMD and SIMD in receiving regulation certifications?
They both are same. SIMD is defined by the US FDA and SAMD is by the other regulators, but the FDA is also following the SAMD only. So there's no much any difference. SIMD is software in a medical device and SAMD is software as a medical device. So
yes, that's so. So this last question, I will just take this and we'll wind up the session. Right. So given the new changes coming in, how can startups strategize for such regulatory changes?
Start building the softwares and the framework from a very early stage only, right? If you are developing a software, right, so start developing in such a way that your rules and regulations from very day one is fulfilled, right? So prepare a detailed checklist of the software as a medical device rules and regulations, and start building your strategy or your team in such a way that they are experienced in doing all your verification and validation in-house only. Because if you outsource the verification and validation of ANML or SAMD, it is very costly, very, very costly. Because the software license, if I talk about the software license, is very expensive. So it's better to prepare the checklist and how you want to go for it.
Yeah. Thank you, Siddharth. So with that, we'll close this today's session. Thank you so much for your time once again
Thank you.
for having the session of Knowledge Tuesday. And thank you all the participants for attending this Knowledge Tuesday session. Please follow us on social media pages. So we would be conducting more knowledge sessions going forward. We also had a feedback form for this link, requesting you to kindly fill it up for us to improve the upcoming Knowledge Tuesday sessions. Thank you, everybody. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you all.